Thank you so much for being here with us. I'd love to understand more about how you birth these sort of ideas within your lab, and then how do you structure a partnership with industry? Why would you do something like that? And just happy to learn about your process.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me. I'm happy to share what I can about these different grant mechanisms and how they relate to FDA regulation from at least my experience. I certainly don't have knowledge about all aspects of FDA and different devices, but I can share from somebody who doesn't come from an industry background and from somebody who doesn't have a huge amount of experience in that area, how you would get started and how you might understand some of the different steps. So I have just a few slides to talk a little bit about the NIH grant mechanisms that are related to small businesses. So I'm going to share this here. So one great way to partner with industry is through a small business research grant. And there's two different kinds generally of grants that are awarded to small businesses or related to small businesses. And it's a small business innovation research grant. Now this can be awarded only to a small business or a small business and a research partner. This is the grant mechanism that I've used several times. And I can explain a little bit about the nature of those studies, but when I go into the different potential mechanisms within the SBIR and STTR grants, I can talk about how different products fit in at different phases. So there are a lot of different requirements for each of these two types of grants. And the main thing to keep in mind about these grants is that they're a little bit different from traditional NIH grants where the goal is to, advance the research. And of course, you want to advance the research as part of the development and testing of this new product. But really the goal of these grants is to commercialize the product. So a major component of these grant applications is the commercialization plan. Whether the product is already in market, which is more atypical, or whether you're proposing to develop the product with the small business, a major important component is how you're going to bring that product to market and commercialize it to get it into the hands of consumers, because that's really the focus of this type of grant mechanism. Most of the institutes at NIH support these grant mechanisms, but you would be sure need to reach out to whatever institute you are interested in applying to make sure that they do support this. So as I mentioned, the Small Business Innovation Research Grant is really a partnership between the business and an optional research partner or academic research partner, where the academic research partner is the subcontract. And so they each have kind of different requirements in terms of the amount of funding per study phase that can go to the small business and the research partner. So that's something to keep in mind. The other type of grant is the Small Business Technology Transfer Grant. And this is where the PI can be at the small business or at the research institution. So this type of grant may be for, let's say you've developed some new technology in your research lab, but you don't have the ability to turn that into a product. You may license that technology to the small business as part of this grant, but still maintain the intellectual property. Whereas the SBIR grant is really, it's the small business that is holding the intellectual property. So again, the goal of these grants is commercialization, and that's really what you want to think about as you're writing this grant and as you're reaching out to talk with different program officers. This is just a graphic that is from the SBIR STTR website as part of NIH, and it talks about the different phases you can apply for. So if you just have an idea, you haven't developed anything yet, then you're going to apply for a phase 1. That's the development and feasibility testing. If you have already done a phase 1, then you apply for a phase 2. And then there's also options to do something called a fast track. That's where you probably already have the product, but you don't have feasibility data just yet. And so you would want to apply for a kind of phase 1 and phase 2 combined. And there's also the direct to phase 2, which is if you have a product and you already have some feasibility data, but you really want to test it as part of, say, a clinical trial. Some of these other mechanisms, phase 2B, phase 3, these are different programs to enhance commercialization. NIH has a lot of resources to help bring products to market. I'm not as familiar with these, but there's a lot of different supports that NIH provides as part of these other programs to help facilitate products getting into the market, into the hands of consumers. And then the last but a very important component of this is FDA regulation, which is a very complicated but critical part of the process, particularly if you're developing a new product such as a drug. And that includes a supplement, such as a small business that I've partnered with has developed a nutraceutical supplement. And as part of the research, so as part of, if you're awarded the grant, what you will need to have is an approved investigational new drug application. And this is needed when you're either going to study something that's unapproved, or you're studying an approved drug, but it's a new indication or in a new application. You can get a commercial IND. That's only relevant if the business or the corporation is applying for the IND, or such as in my case, this is a research investigator initiated IND. What's really important about this is that you get a lot of support. I will hopefully be able to help you avoid some of the mistakes that I made in this process, because as the investigator, you hold a lot of responsibility in the testing of this product and in holding the IND. And so it's really important that you are aware of all of the regulatory issues, the need for an FDA monitor, that you work with your institution in both the application and kind of execution of the IND. If your institution doesn't have a lot of kind of infrastructure to support that, as many institutions don't, because this is most often done by industry, then you really want to partner with a colleague or a mentor who has done this before, and it will help the process go a lot more smoothly. I will also say the FDA is incredibly helpful. If you anticipate applying for an IND, certainly reach out to them. They will do a consultation with you. They'll make sure your IND goes to the right place, and they can be incredibly helpful.
Wonderful. Thank you. That was a wonderful overview, both of the mechanisms and also some of the subtleties. And what I really like about what you're, the commercialization aspect is, as a very junior and much more junior scientist myself, I've written a lot of papers, proposed some ideas, but none of those ideas have made it from an academic journal into the hands of patients where they can benefit patients. And so what I really like about your work is you're trying to produce a usable product, something that solves a very clear problem. And so, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that with us.